Alright, what's going on, guys? Hope y'all are doing well. So in this video, we are going to be looking at the top 10 best loadouts to use in zombies. I made a video a couple of months back that is somewhat outdated now because of all of the patches Treyarch has come out with and changes that have been made to Cold War zombies. That video, in a large part, has been made relatively nullified, so this is going to be a new updated list about the best loadouts that you can use currently in the game. Whether you're using these for the Outbreak Easter egg or you're playing round-based maps and just want a really solid gun to rely on, this is going to give you 10 different options and explain what attachments are good on them and why. Assuming no major changes come to weapon balancing in the future for this game, then this is going to be a video that you can come back to months down the road and rely on and get good setups from. To make all these weapons, feel free to follow along in your menu and just create these guns as we go through. I really hope this video is able to help, and we're going to go for a pretty big like goal that I think you guys are probably up to the challenge for. We're going to go for 3,000 likes. If you do happen to be new to the channel as well, remember to subscribe. We're going for 500,000 by the end of 2021. Let me also mention that these are going to be my personalized builds that I seem to get the best results from, and I do encourage you guys to experiment as well. If there's something you like better, then feel free to change it. But with that being said, sit back, relax, and let's get started. So coming in at our first spot on this loadout list is going to be the PPSH SMG. Now, while it is true that all of the SMGs in the game got a pretty major buff in the last patch, the PPSH in particular saw the biggest improvement because of its headshot damage multiplier. When this weapon was released to the game, it was a pretty good gun insofar as its like ammo capacity and its fire rate, all that kind of stuff, but eventually it did get to a point in high rounds where it was essentially useless against even regular enemies, and like panzers or anything armored, forget about it. It's doing absolutely nothing. So on top of this new patch that came out, I've been experimenting with different attachments and different loadout setups to make the PPSH optimized, and I think I found a pretty good solution. So this is one of the optimal setups that I feel like the PPSH can be ran with. Now, the very notable attachments that are absolutely non-negotiable on this weapon, I think, are the Task Force barrel, the tactical stock, and possibly even the bruiser grip. You can also choose to use the drum mag rather than the speed mag, but that's personal preference at the end of the day. One of the things you really want to avoid is sprint to fire time and also shooting move penalties. The nice thing about the Task Force barrel is it will just basically increase the base damage that the PPSH is going to be putting out. The tac stock allows you to move faster while aiming down the sights and firing. The bruiser grip gives you just a base increase in movement speed as well, which again is unbelievably important in zombies. Like ADS speed and even flinch resistance don't really mean anything in zombies, so it's not one of the things you want to focus on. You almost build these weapons as like opposite of what you would in MP. But I found this PPSH build to be particularly useful, and I think that just in really any given circumstance, it's going to be exactly what you need. Taking our number 9 spot is a weapon that was a little bit more straightforward to design a loadout setup for, and this is the Street Sweeper shotgun. Now, unfortunately, in the latest balancing pass, they didn't touch this shotgun at all. Both the Gallo and the Howler got buffed in terms of their overall damage. The Street Sweeper only had its ammo count increased, but nothing as far as its damage goes. So for the recommended Street Sweeper build with the attachments, we have the Marathon stock, the 18-round drum mag, the 5mm laser sight. We also have the Infantry choke, muzzle attachment, and also the Task Force barrel. Now, this is going to be a pattern that you see with a lot of the weapons. The Task Force barrel, generally speaking, is one of the best ones that you can apply to them, but certainly for the Street Sweeper, because it didn't get that base damage increase like along with the other shotguns, you kind of need this other attachment to compensate for that. The Street Sweeper's best attribute is the fact that it has just a stupid amount of ammo, but that's pretty much it. I mean, honestly, it's not one of the best guns in the game, but I know there's a subset of people that really prefer the Street Sweeper, so for the 6 of you out there, I got you with this loadout. In all seriousness, this weapon isn't too bad at all. It's just not on the same par, on the same level as the other shotguns in the game, but compared to most other choices as far as the entire weapon selection goes, it's definitely up there. So coming up next on our list is going to be the Krig 6. Now, this is probably one of the more popular guns in the game, and it's already amazing just on its base variant, but adding attachments to it can make it absolutely devastating. For those of you unaware, most of the assault rifles in the game on the last balance patch pretty much got their headshot damage doubled, and in this weapon in particular, you can really feel it. Now, the optimal attachment setup if you're running this on a loadout should look something like this, and there's a few attachments on here that are of unbelievable importance, that being the stock, the grip, and also the magazine. This combination of attachments still allows you to move quickly while aiming down the sights with this weapon because it is an assault rifle. You are going to be ADSing a lot. The bruiser grip, again, just gives you a base movement speed multiplier. You don't really need to worry about recoil or even sprint to fire time because a lot of the moments you see in game are going to be a large sum of enemies, or maybe a particularly big one that you can't really miss. So recoil really isn't one of those things that should be considered, although it is useful to have hip fire accuracy, which is why I recommended the laser sight. I found that this build allows you to still be extremely mobile while putting out very consistent damage. The recoil, I promise you, even though a lot of the attachments will, you know, maybe not negate it too well, it's really not a big deal at all, and you'll find that the ability to stay on your feet and keep moving around even while aiming down the sights and firing is a privilege you wouldn't trade for anything else. Assault rifles are absolutely solid in the game now, so if you haven't tried out this new one on the balance patch yet, then try out this Krig setup and let me know what you think. Up next, we have yet another assault rifle for this list, the XM4. Again, this is the base version that you start with, and the attachment setup on this particular weapon are going to be pretty similar to the ones we talked about for the Krig 6. Most importantly, the attachments that are absolute must-haves are the Raider pad and the bruiser grip, but outside of that, I do encourage you to experiment a little bit, especially with like the muzzle and also the handle attachments. These allow you to cut down things like flinch resistance, but once again, in zombies, this does almost absolutely nothing, so it's not even something to worry about. With the XM4, we have pretty much the same concept as our previous weapon, making this as mobile and agile as possible while still retaining all of the wonderful handling properties that it naturally comes with. Now, if you're just going to be shooting zombies like in a regular round-based map or something, I'm going to strongly recommend that you put on fully upgraded napalm burst with this gun. While it doesn't have any weird effects like stunning the enemies in place, the napalm burst will allow you to put out consistently almost double your damage. You can use this as a very reliable outbreak weapon, even doing the Easter egg with it. It can take on the Die Maschine or Firebase Z Easter egg no problem. It pretty much doesn't have any circumstance in which this isn't optimal. By no means is it a very specialized gun, but I promise with this loadout setup, I think you'll really enjoy it. Up next, we have a little bit more of a specialized weapon. While still in the AR class, it isn't really the jack of all trades like the XM4 or even the Krig 6 are for that matter. The AK47 is a little bit different in the fact that it's going to have a bit of a faster time to kill with the right attachments. However, the recoil that you have to deal with and some of the mobility and handling properties are a little bit wonky sometimes if you don't have the correct loadout. After some experimenting, I came to the conclusion that the ideal loadout setup will look something like this. Now, in terms of the other ARs that we talked about, the XM4 and the Krig, you don't really have to worry about recoil, but on the AK you do, especially when you add the RPK barrel. This significantly increases the kick that you're going to have. So you will need to have a compensator in order to take care of that sort of thing, but the AK, if you can control your shots, will absolutely melt not only regular enemies, but especially boss zombies. While the AK definitely has the advantage of just having overall better damage output than something like the Krig or the XM4, it also has a little bit more damage fall off at a range. So it's not great. It's not as good an Outbreak, I don't think, for shooting long distances, even if you do hit your shots. The damage fall off does seem to be a little bit more noticeable on this guns than some of the other in its class. Hipfire is a little bit better than you would expect, so this kind of makes this weapon optimized for close to medium range engagements. Nothing long range, as the recoil is a little bit too unpredictable, and not to mention that damage fall off is pretty brutal on the AK, but nonetheless it is a very popular weapon. And for those of you where this is your favorite gun watching at home, I do recommend you try out this loadout, and I assure you, you won't be disappointed. Next up, we have the Stoner 63, and this gun was quite the challenge, coming up with an optimal attachments for really good results on this weapon, because I feel like there's pretty much two philosophies you can have when designing an LMG class and getting a loadout for that. You can either make a really good weapon that's good at just hunkering down and camping and having just insane damage and ammo output, and that might come at the cost of something like mobility and the agility that you have with it, or you can make it kind of like almost an AR hybrid where it's still as mobile as it can be, but maybe it isn't the best at just sitting down and camping and having a ridiculous magazine and stuff like that. With that in mind, I honestly went with the former. I feel like with the game pace of Cold War Zombies, it was better to go with a little bit more of an agile weapon. So this is the attachment setup that I ultimately ended up settling on, and it has a lot of the hallmarks of the previous weapons like the Raider pad and of course the bruiser grip, and then also the Task Force barrel. Those I'm pretty sure are like the holy trinity. You definitely don't want to get rid of those in any zombie setup, but a lot of the other stuff I recommend that you guys experiment with, especially like the magazine, the scope, and even the muzzle attachments. If you like a little bit more of a like campy friendly gun, you can absolutely do that and substitute a lot of the attachments on that particular list. Now, if you're going to be using this weapon to play something like the Outbreak Easter egg, and especially in the boss fight, then I am going to recommend the mobile setup that I built in this video. But if you're primarily going to be camping on Die Maschine or Firebase Z or anything else of that nature, then definitely feel free to experiment with like different attachments that don't really focus on the movement and agility attributes. Hipfire isn't amazing, but it's not too bad on this weapon, and the Stoner is just the best LMG in its class already, so you can't really go wrong with it, even if you just completely put on terrible attachments. But there's different ones that are optimized for different situations is the point I'm trying to make. Up next, we have a gun that honestly I didn't give much credence to when it was out, only it was from your guys' recommendations in the comments of some of my past videos that turned me on to this weapon, so thank you guys very much for that. But the Pharah is probably the best assault rifle in the game, hands down. I would describe this weapon as the perfect cross between the Krig 6 and the AK, and might even transcend both of those weapons. Now here is the ideal attachment loadout that I run for the Pharah, and personally I see really great results with this one. The attachment formula is pretty similar to any of the other assault rifles that you might have on this list, and for obvious reasons, it really helps give you that extra boost in movement speed that you desperately need in Cold War zombies. But something with the Pharah is that it doesn't have any of the weaknesses like the AK does, where it's got a better fire rate than the AK, pretty much deals almost the exact same amount of damage, and the hip fire is actually really good. When this gun came out, I used it a little bit, but honestly didn't really look twice at it. But after you guys opened my eyes a little bit and let me know how just amazing the weapon really is, then I've completely changed my outlook. I can say with absolute confidence that the Pharah is now the best assault rifle in the game as of right now, and especially with this new update, the headshot damage that you get out of this, especially combining it with the damage barrel, it absolutely violates anything it comes across, including megatons and really any special enemy. If tac rifles aren't really your thing, and if you're playing the Outbreak Easter egg, I'm gonna recommend this particular weapon and you upgrade it fully to take to that boss fight, because it is very solid in that circumstance. Up next, and getting into our top 3, is a weapon I've honestly put an embarrassing amount of time into using. This is, of course, the Hauer shotgun. For all intents and purposes, this may as well be the best gun in the game, or at least that was the case, and is still probably the best gun for high rounds in Outbreak, but I don't believe is maybe the best overall shotgun anymore. Because I've played with this weapon literally for so many hours and different attachments experimenting here and there, this is ultimately the combination that I ended up selecting. Unfortunately, a few patches ago, the Task Force barrel got nerfed a little bit, so it doesn't deal as much extra damage as it used to. However, you still do get a pretty decent flat bonus of damage, and with the most recent patch, the Hauer does even more base damage as of right now, and the pellets work a little bit differently too, so I feel like this is definitely the optimal setup if you're going to be playing something like Outbreak high rounds. This build is primarily centered around you having the most amount of ammunition at hand possible, while keeping you mobile, active, and having really good hip fire, as you're not going to be ADSing a whole lot with this shotgun. It's pretty much got one of the fastest DPS in the entire game against, bigger enemies like megatons and panzers, but you do need to hit critical headshots, or else the pellets don't really deal that much damage at all on, typical body shots. Pretty high risk, high reward gun, all things considered, but I feel like it's definitely one of the best guns in the game. Maybe not number 1 anymore though, so that's why it's coming in at number 3. Next up, we've got a gun that has really stepped up to the plate recently. Obviously, it was always good, but I think really in thanks to the Outbreak Easter egg has become a lot more prevalent. This is the M16, of course. Now, it is probably the best in the entire tac rifle class, but after playing through the Outbreak Easter egg a handful of times and experimenting with different setups, I actually think that this varies pretty dramatically from how you want to set up something like an AR. This is again considering you're doing this primarily with the Outbreak Easter egg in mind, but I'll show you my attachment setup for this gun. One of the biggest deviations the M16 has in compared to any of the other assault rifles is the stock. Now, I recommend the tactical stock, which is the first one you unlock for this weapon class. Everything else is, pretty much the same. The bruiser grip, the barrel, obviously. I can run a silencer on it for extra equipment in the boss fight, which is pretty useful, but feel free to change that one. The reason you run the initial stock instead of the one you generally unlock at the end is because this one on the tac rifle class gives you a bigger bonus of ADS while walking speed. And that attribute single-handedly affects the biggest flaw in the M16, which is the ridiculous amount of slowdown you get while firing this weapon. If you can counteract that in any way, shape, or form, the M16 is going to feel so much better, and it doesn't really have a ton of recoil to deal with. The hip fire is actually pretty good for what you would expect, and really counteracting its biggest weakness is really all you need to do in order to make this a solid gun, and you unlock it with the first stock that you get. Feel free to change things like the magazine and also the sight, but in general, I'm going to recommend this as your M16 setup. It's absolutely phenomenal for the Outbreak Easter egg in all circumstances. So anyways, the number one gun on this list, the best loadout in Cold War Zombies right now, honestly, has got to be the Gallo. Now, it is currently Gallo season, ladies and gentlemen. I think insofar as Outbreak high rounds are concerned, after this balance patch, the Howler still might be a little bit better, but I think that the Gallo is the best overall shotgun now, and this is the build that I'm currently using, and after some experimentation, I do believe is objectively the best one. Now, it does not do as much damage per shot as the Howler might, but with the tighter ADS spread and the actual higher amount of ammo that you get per magazine compared to the Howler, it's actually probably a bit better in terms of its overall capacity now. Completely decimates anything in the boss fight on Outbreak, whether that's enemies or even the orbs that Legion will put out in order for you to damage him. Once again, this loadout build focuses primarily on movement speed and also just sheer damage output. So I do highly recommend, if you're still struggling with the Outbreak Easter egg, to run this particular setup and let me know if you have better results. For all of these loadouts we mentioned in the video, I recommend you make them and then save them as custom mods, so if you happen to come across any of these weapons naturally in-game, you can automatically apply the best attachments to them. It's an absolutely amazing feature Treyarch added recently, so I hope this video did help. If you guys did enjoy it, then be sure to give it a like rating. Subscribe if you are new to the channel before you go, and I also stream zombies almost every single day on Twitch. If you don't follow me over there already, links in the description. I would love to have you in the community. It is a great time. But other than that, have a great rest of your day, guys, and I'll see you all in the next stream or the next video. Take it easy. I gotta go, and peace out.